Open this public hearing of the Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Defence Subcommittee in relation to its inquiry into the Department of Defence Annual Report 2023-24. This hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament's website, and the proof and official transcripts of the proceedings will be published on the committee's website. I now welcome representatives of industry to give evidence today, and they will be followed by representatives of the Department of Defence and the Australian Submarine Agency to give information to the committee a little later. For the Hansard record, would you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear before the Defence Committee today?
Yep, so good morning, Gavin Stewart. I'm the Executive General Manager for Austal Defence.
And Rob Jackson, I'm the Head of Capability at Austal Defence.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be treated as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. I now invite you to make an opening statement before we proceed to discussion.
Okay, thank you. So I would just first of all like to thank the committee for the opportunity to speak today. It's extremely well received, and I think for Austal this is a very exciting time for us, as we have been nominated as the strategic partner for the Commonwealth for shipbuilding in WA. We see a fantastic future for our business and also the local industry within Henderson, and we look forward to working with the Commonwealth over the years to deliver fantastic capability to the Navy and Army.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, did you want to add anything?
No, nothing further to add.
Okay, can I just ask you straight up then, Mr. Jackson, as the facilitator really of the capability dimensions, what are the critical challenges that you face right now at Austal?
I think it's just a broader precinct. Challenges that we do have. The primary focus will be facilities and workforce. Obviously getting the decisions necessary to enable us to commence particularly the landing craft heavy project towards the end of next year. And then building the workforce that we need collectively over time in the midst of a variety of other activities that are planned for the precinct itself.
Okay, so let's just get on the record for the public. The precinct that you're talking about while we're taking evidence here in Western Australia is the Henderson precinct. This is currently a precinct in which there is a lot of industry, as well as the development now of a defence presence there in a very significant way. There's co-location with a lot of suppliers into the mining, gas and oil industries here in Western Australia. That's the first thing. So there's an integration opportunity for innovation, but also challenges in terms of space, which the committee observed yesterday, and also access into the community. So that's one of your physical challenges right now with regard to the creation. The second thing I think it's important to put on the record is the type of ships that you were just talking about then. Is it LHDs?
Landing craft heavies.
LCDs? Yeah, LCH, landing craft heavies. So do you want to explain what that is? The committee's just come from Darwin, where we spoke with Army, Navy and Air Force up there, and they mentioned the LHDs and the the LCHs and the LCMs to us.
Yes, so the LCH is a 100-metre still-hulled vessel based on the Darwin LST 100. It's currently in service with the Nigerian Navy. They're probably the largest steel ships that would have been built in the precinct, and it requires us to extend our existing Austal footprint into the AMC Cuff area to support the build of that sized vessel.
What's the AMC Cuff?
The Australian Marine Complex Common User Facility.
Which is what we casually called Henderson.
Yeah, the Henderson precinct is made up of that broader strip, which is a number of private companies as well as the state-owned infrastructure that's down there.
And what will the LCH do? Like, what is its functional role in the Army?
So it's there to provide littoral manoeuvre for the Australian Army. So it's basically taking the Australian Army assets out into the archipelago region so they can position there to support their deterrence by denial framework.
Okay, so there's a big challenge there. This is a shift in the type of building. Certainly most Australians wouldn't think that Army needs ships, but that is part of the defence strategy and about Australia facing our geographical reality, with Darwin as our most significant northern site, out of which this will operate. So if I can go to the challenge of building such a vessel and the urgency for its need, creating the workforce to undertake that work. How is the program that the government has laid out and the significant investment going in terms of delivering the workforce you need at the pace you need it? Mr. Stewart?
So, I'll comment. Yeah. So first of all, it's our responsibility as a business to make sure that we have the workforce ready and the capability required, as well as working with local industry to help them grow their capability to support this programme as well. So there's two, under the Strategic Shipbuilding Agreement, there's two pilot programmes. As you mentioned, there's Land and Craft Medium. Land and Craft Medium, we believe that, or we don't believe, we know that we can build that craft within our own facilities currently, within our current workforce, and within the current supply chain that we currently use. So we see that as just business as usual. When we move to Land and Craft Heavy, we recognise that there's a requirement to, one, lift capability, but also to grow capacity as well. So we've been working with local businesses and with the Commonwealth on how we need to grow the capability and how we're going to grow the capability. So with kind of growing our own workforce, but also more importantly, and as importantly, we're also looking across the ecosystem as well to make sure that we understand what businesses we should partner with and what ones should be part of our supply chain to allow them to be fit and ready for Land and Craft Heavy, which commences next year.
So those additional partners, small to medium enterprises, which would operate under you as a prime, I think that's their description in the Commonwealth. So you're the major at the prime level. You're the major provider, and underneath there's going to be a whole chain.
Correct.
Or perhaps we might even call it a connected set, or a net of providers who are going to create workforces themselves to build the kinds of elements that are necessary for the construction of the whole vehicle, whether it's a medium or a large.
Yes, and as spoken, yes, this provides an opportunity for businesses to look forward for the next 12 plus years.
Okay.
So previously, there's always been a concern in shipbuilding that it's peaks and troughs, so the work has never been as certain as what it is now. So now businesses can actually see a future in shipbuilding, which is fantastic for generations to come. So when you look past the pilot programmes, you then move into general purpose frigate. So we're getting ready for the next 20, 30 year of build programmes coming through here.
And this isn't the way it's been, the sector's been operating in the last 20 or 30 years. This is a very significant shift that's driven by the 2023 Defence Strategy, and then the national security and sovereignty that is now embedded in that National Defence Strategy. It reflects the government's commitment to continuous naval building and sustainment. It's a very different model of potential jobs for young Australians and older Australians who want to retrain. In what way do you see this changing the workforce?
So one, I think, so we have, or the industry has continued to struggle with a capability due to other industries. So it's very difficult in defence to compete with the resource sector, as an example. But what we're kind of seeing now is there's a lot of people that maybe left defence and have tried the resource sector and now recognise, you know what, we can actually come back into defence, go home to our families every night, have good quality time with the families, as well as a really good career opportunity and longevity within defence now. So that's never been there for defence employees before. It's always been, let's see what the next 1-2 years is going to look like. Now we've got the ability to say, we've got an order book of 12 years, plus we're going to have another order book for another 20, 30 years as we negotiate and work with the Commonwealth to onshore the Megami class frigates as well.
We've only got you for a short time, so I'm going to ask one more question and then go to my colleagues. So we've got $1.5 billion invested by the government in fee-free TAFE. We've got $250 million to attract, train and retain a nuclear-powered sub-workers and to get that know-how. We've got a skills and training authority. We've got a maritime workforce skills council bringing together industry, trade unions and government. all of that's going on, but you still are facing challenges in getting the workforce you need for the quick uplift, while our workforce is under development for the longer term, where people can now anticipate a 20 or 30-year career in one industry and in one place. So what's the nut that we need to crack right in the next little while? And I am hearing a Scottish accent answering this question. So what do we need to do to improve the quality, the scale and the capacity of our current workforce in a timely way to get on and deliver these things on time?
Yeah, and this is multi-layered. This I'm going to say that it's very complex. The solution that we required just now. So there's a number of things. One is that we need to make sure that we can get out to the TAFEs and universities and the schools and colleges to show them and to demonstrate that shipbuilding is actually quite exciting now. So there's a long-term opportunity there, but how we do shipbuilding today is far different to how we did it 20, 30 years ago, and we can attract a different calibre of individual, young adult, to actually want to come into shipbuilding and see they've maybe got 30, 40 years of a career opportunity in front of them, where they're not necessarily going to be welding all day or doing what we used to do years ago. So we're looking at how do we attract young talent into shipbuilding. On top of that, as I said earlier, we're looking back at the talent that's maybe moved to different industries and saying to them, you know what, there's an opportunity to come back in now. We can now guarantee jobs for a long time now. So there's an opportunity to make sure you go home to your families. But then on top of that, we also recognise, and I mentioned this in this same conversation, I think it was last year or the year before, we need to do something around enabling skills to come into this country quicker and easier. It is far too difficult for us to go and engage someone with high experience, because we don't have the level of skills that's required today to meet, especially when we look at general purpose frigate and we look at AUKUS nuclear submarines. We need to do something that enables the visa system to allow us to bring skilled workers into Australia to help us train up our young potential people or high potential people, to bring them up to the standard that we need. And the visa situation and the security situation unfortunately is very, very difficult for us to do that. We can do it in the ones and twos, but even the ones and twos takes a long time to do. But see, when you're looking at the amount of people that we need to bring into W.A. Henderson over the next kind of 5, 10, so 1, 2, 5, 10 years, it's multitudes of thousands of people that we're going to have to bring, and we need high experience to help them on the journey to grow that capability.
Yeah. So in terms of the visa situation, a shorthand version of that has been described to us as an AUKUS visa, which would deal with issues of quicker access, plus also to deal with the security clearance matters that are attached to that. Could I invite you to write to the committee to take a question on notice and give us your thoughts and ideas, and perhaps some vignettes of the kind of challenges that you've faced, where the stickiness in the situation is, and what it would look like if we were going to meet your needs in a timely way, attending to national security concerns, which are really pressing at this time. That would be, I think, very helpful. The committee will write to you and give you a direction with regard to that, but we need to get on the record the actual practical problems. I'm going to go to Mr. Rebello for the first lot of questions, and then I'll come next to you, my colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from the Chair's questions, do we engage in much overseas training where we're trying to get the skills from overseas instead of bringing people here? Are we sending our talent over there to be upskilled, and how does that look?
So we have a large organisation in the US as well. Yeah. And we have a number of Australian citizens that work, and actually was part of the building of that organisation in Australia. So we have a lot of people in Australia, in the United States. We also have our businesses also spread in the Philippines and also Vietnam. And again, the majority of our kind of leadership team is Australian citizens. It's in the Philippines and Vietnam as well. So yes, so we're certainly transitioning capability to these areas for the work that we do there. But as a business, we also recognise that we need to bring in further talent back into Australia to grow to the capability that we need as well.
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned about working with local industries and businesses. Something that we've seen in submissions is that not enough contracts are going to SMEs, to Australian SMEs. How do you think we could encourage, or I mean, from your perspective, to what extent do you engage SMEs in the defence contracts, but also where are the opportunities for growth and what are the issues with further engagement?
Yeah, so and I think I said this yesterday, so traditionally our business has been quite an organic business. We've done a lot of the work in-house because that's suited our business model, and that also helped with kind of having the continuous kind of Cape build programme as well. We have recognised as the business, though, as we move to LCH, especially LCH, so land and craft heavy, that we require to create this ecosystem that I said earlier. So we require the local businesses to come on the journey with us and to be part of the future kind of shipbuilding or continuous shipbuilding programme. So we're engaging with them daily now to work through what capabilities they have, and we're also trying to make sure that SMEs understand what their core capability is as well. I think sometimes what goes wrong, it's too easy for us to get an SME to do a bit of everything, and then we fail and they fail. So what we're actually trying to do is to say that what's your core capability, how can we help you enhance that core capability, which then allows you to have future work in these programmes ongoing. So we're having daily meetings with them, but we're heavily involved with Henderson Alliance, who's really helpful for us also to engage with the local businesses as well. And that's helping us kind of navigate who the right businesses are, and also allowing them to start investing in their businesses to help us and to help ourselves.
And so from a practical perspective, if you're an Australian SME and you're wanting to grow in this space, is it easy to access? Are there access issues to getting into?
It's always difficult to become a defence, I would say, business or industry business. But there is a lot of help there, and certainly as a Prime, we try to help businesses and try to help them through or to navigate through some of the complexity of being a defence business. Also, and again, I'll say it from a Henderson or from a WA perspective, Henderson Alliance, that's what they're there to help and support, and they provide excellent support to the local businesses to allow them to navigate and to uplift their business to make sure that they're fit and ready to be part of the defence industry.
And the primary, I guess, point of difficulty, would that be from a security clearance level?
Security clearance, cyber clearance, it's all the different defence levels that they need to hold to allow us to pass on information to them and to make sure that they can secure that information that we're going to provide them as well.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Ms Clutter.
Thank you, Chair. I have three, if I may. Mr Stewart, thank you. Nice to see you again this morning. I think it would be just great to start for the public who may be listening or who may read the transcript. What does the Strategic Shipbuilder Agreement actually mean? Is it with the Commonwealth? How long is it for? Is that where you contract for the LCM, LCH, GPF?
Yep.
What is it?
Yep. So Strategic Shipbuilding Agreement is a framework or an agreement between ourselves and the Commonwealth. So it's a direct contract with the Commonwealth. And that is around us still working within the enterprise with the Commonwealth to build the capability that the Commonwealth needs for surface vessels. So for all shipbuilding defence vessels in WA will come under that strategic shipbuilding. So what happens is there's a conditions of deed that say that this is the framework that we must work under. These are the key objectives that we need to achieve as an enterprise, which includes growing supply chain capability, making sure that we have the right infrastructure in place, making sure that we do not impact any other defence programmes as we grow that capability and as we bring programmes in. And then underneath that framework then sits a number of different tasking statements, which is contracts to deliver the capability. So land and craft medium and land and craft heavy are two tasking statements which sit under the strategic agreement framework, and then GPF would be the next one that would sit under that as well.
Okay, understand. So there's tasking statements underneath the Strategic Shipbuilder Agreement for those different three different capabilities, and then do you enter into separate contracts in relation to? So would you have a strategic material?
It's one main contract, which is the SSA, and then the tasking statements have certain clauses that sit over and above that as well.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And just in terms of the LCMs, LCHs and the GPFs, you talked about a pipeline of work for 20 to 30 years. Are we talking one vessel every 2 years, 3 years? What does the actual production of the capability look like?
Yeah, it would be far easier if that was the case. Yeah, so both LCM and LCH now are going to commence production probably within the same quarter now, it's looking like, due to the complexity of getting the contracts in place. In the drumbeat, so I think the drumbeat is, and Rob, you probably answer what the actual drumbeat of delivery is.
So, yep. So the landing craft medium is roughly about a 16, 18 month build time for each individual vessel, and there's one of them delivered between 4, 5, 6 months. I can't remember the final drumbeat, something in that order. So you'll see 2, 3 a year delivered for the landing craft medium. The landing craft heavy, being a much bigger vessel, is about a 3-year build cycle for each individual vessel, and the drumbeater deliveries are currently aimed at one every 12 months. Part of that's also because Army's got to build a workforce to crew those vessels, so it's designed so enabling Army the time to generate that workforce that will sail those vessels away. As I said yesterday, it's also helpful because it does level out the longer term workforce so that we're not creating peaks, particularly, that really drives that continual naval shipbuilding approach.
Yeah, okay. So you really are going to be building lots of different capability at the same time, concurrently, and needing different skills attached to each different asset.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why. So LCM we will build in our current facilities, and LCH will be built in the new facilities.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. And my final question is just about AIC. So Mr. Rebello and the Chair were asking about, Australian SMEs. So in some forms of defence contracting, and I don't know what's in the Strategic Shipbuilder Agreement, I'm certainly not asking you to reveal, details you can't, but are there AIC requirements?
Yes.
Okay. And so even though there's AIC requirements, the barriers to meeting those are the kind of DISP security requirements that Australian SMEs need to be able to qualify to provide services to.
Yeah, but what I would say is we have been working. So Henderson has a large, I'm going to say, community of defence partners already in place. So there's a lot of really, really good businesses that already support defence, and we're comfortable that we have the right businesses already to go, and that's where we've set our AIC targets at and agreed with the Collins what they're at.
Yeah.
So I don't see a risk from an AIC perspective. It's more around if there's any businesses that want to join defence industry from a different industry. That's where we need to work with them to make sure that they're ready to be a defence business, and to make sure that they understand the complexities and what they're actually signing up to as well.
Yeah, okay, so great. So there are enough SMEs, as it were, to satisfy AIC requirements, which is great, but for new entrants to the market, the setup, just to use that phrase, is complicated. Necessary, obviously, but complicated, and that's where some more energy needs to be directed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And over to the local, saving the best for last.
Thank you very much.
Senator Ellie Whittaker.
Thank you for joining us again today. I have a couple of questions for you about the precinct specifically at Henderson. Particularly, you mentioned in your kind of opening evidence, I think, to the Chair's questions, that you will need to expand your footprint on the precinct to be able to deliver the landing craft heavy. What do you need at the precinct specifically in order to deliver what you have been asked to deliver? And what do you see as, the investment that's coming from the federal government into the precinct? What do you need from that investment in order for you to be able to deliver?
Yeah, and it's so probably unfortunately the decision on the defence precinct has not allowed us to fully meet what we would have wanted for the start of these programmes. So because
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. So the defence precinct still decision has not been fully made. That whole footprint out at the moment. So we're working very closely with the Commonwealth and the local industries to say, well, what can we create as a temporary shipbuilding yard to allow us to build LCH. So that's not ideal. That's certainly not what we hoped when we started on this journey. But unfortunately, that's where we find ourselves now. So the current position is that we will be building a temporary yard for LCH, and we're working with state and also with the Commonwealth to make sure that we get the footprint right, as well as making sure that we can deconflict from any resource industries as well, and that we don't create any kind of problems in their area as well. So we're working closely with them, but at the same time we're also working with the Commonwealth to say where is the final solution. So it's probably more complex than what we would have liked, I would say. It's probably been a bit frustrating for ourselves, state and for the Commonwealth. But we are where we are, and we recognise that now. We're starting to make decisions on what the temporary shipyard is going to look like, and we've certainly put a good plan in place, and the Commonwealth are very supportive of that. But we recognise that sometime in the future we're going to have to mobilise somewhere else, and it'll be somewhere within the footprint. We just currently do not know where that is. And
Within the Henderson precinct footprint.
Yes. So once the defence precinct is totally understood, then we'll understand where nuclear submarines are going to be, where sustainment is going to be, and also where shipbuilding is going to be. And there's a high probability that we will have to mobilise to somewhere else. Hence the reason that we're probably going to look at, and I'm going to say, movable buildings rather than temporary buildings, to make sure that we can have a facility that's fit for building land and craft heavy, but also recognising that maybe during that programme, or maybe after that programme, for the next programme, we're going to have to relocate to another area within the Henderson precinct.
And when do you need to start building land and craft heavy?
So we need to start next year. So I would say, yeah, we need to start next year.
And so you're saying you'll need temporary facilities inside the precinct.
So we're looking to utilise some of the facilities that's already there, and then growing capability through temporary facilities.
Outside the precinct.
Within this precinct.
Within
the precinct. So, but within the CUF area, the Common User Facility, and that's where we're looking to do the temporary build programme there, LCH programme there. We're looking to use some of the buildings that's on the Common User Facility. We're also looking to develop with further capability, which would be temporary buildings, to allow us to build ship units, ship blocks, to do painting, etc., fabrication work, and then we would move into the main building in the Common User Facility to assemble the vessel. So that's our current strategy, and that's supported by the Commonwealth, and we're working with the state to make sure that we can achieve that. But we also then recognise at some point the resource sector will come back into the Common User Facility, and then the defence precinct will be somewhere else, or could be somewhere else.
Okay. I think that's probably the extent of my questions for us, Chair.
Great. So can I prevail on you to stay for just a few more minutes? If you're able to do that?
Yep.
Wonderful. Going back to the Australian industry capability, the program aims to ensure consideration of and inclusion of Australian industry capability in defence contracting. It's been critiqued as lacking effectiveness. How would you respond to this as a prime system integrator?
Should I go?
Yeah, I can go. I suppose Austal's been in a luxury position that we have been Australian for many years, so a lot of our programs have achieved their AIC or ACE targets, Australian Contract Expenditure. I guess from our side, it's about building those partnerships to get people into our supply chain, but we want to do that in a long-term view. So we still have the same ACE considerations. So I think from the last inquiry that was done around the AIC program, they've put a bit more meat into the performance that we must achieve to demonstrate that we are achieving the Australian industry capability under the strategic shipbuilding contract itself. Equally, making sure that we are declaring that and engaging it. So sometimes in the equipment side, it's a bit tricky to get things manufactured here, particularly large engines, those type of things, which sometimes make a big percentage up on smaller vessels. But the work content that we definitely want to look to see, fabrication work, the installation work, as much of the manufacturing that we can on board here. So in our case, those measures put onus on us to demonstrate that we are achieving it, and there are some remedies under the contract for the Commonwealth to take some action against us if that's the case.
Yeah, so let's talk engines.
Yep.
And explain what prime system integration is.
Yep. So we try to look for local suppliers. So if I use one program as an example, Caterpillar, American company, manufactures most of our engines overseas. Yep. We work with the local agent. EPSA is a good example. They look to all the value-add things that they can do. So they might receive engine components, be able to assemble that into the full engine, source some of the local equipment that are the auxiliary parts of that, but definitely build the capability on the commissioning and those type of things through the local EPSA business. So that's where we try to make sure we get as much value add onto those things that is very difficult to justify setting up a very large production line. You know, we might order 3 or 4, 3 engines a boat, whereas we're in a pipeline of hundreds and thousands of engines being manufactured and the facilities that have been set up for that. So it's about looking at the opportunities that while we might not be able to onshore big end, high-end manufacturing of those components, but it's getting the greatest value add we can locally.
I guess the risk of needing to be in a supply chain line to the timeline delivery for you is one thing to consider, and the other thing is the upskilling and benefit to the innovation in the country and sovereign capability. So again, can I ask, this prime system integrator seems to be a bit of a problem. So you're talking about a couple of different concerns there. So I'll just ask you to respond to those observations about risk in being in a chain, maybe not a net, and also opportunity for this critical moment with the most significant uplift in defence spend to actually begin to address creating sovereign capability with regard to critical things like engine manufacture.
And so I'll start, if you don't mind, and I'll pass probably back to Bob. I think, so again, that nothing's ever as easy as what it seems, and it is very complex. So speed to capability is absolutely critical for the nation right now. So the Commonwealth have made it crystal clear to us that schedule is so important for us. So as a business, we are working with the Commonwealth to make sure that we can achieve speed to capability at the same time as looking what the right ACE position should be, and how we then bring or onshore some of the things that it might be the right answer today to abroad first. So we talk about engines. We're never going to build engines. Caterpillar are really good engine builders. They provide excellent capability there. Cummins is another company that does exactly the same. But we have local businesses in Australia that, as Rob says, acts as their agent, and they make components. They also provide through life support for us, and they're also the team that works with our team to make sure that we integrate the system properly as well.
Critical for sustainment going forward.
Critical for sustainment forward. So we're creating the kind of, you could say, the register, the Bible of how the platform's going to operate for the next kind of 20, 30 years. We at the same time, we're also working with local companies at the same time and local SMEs at the same time, and connecting them to some of the kind of original equipment manufacturers to say, this, you could become their local agent. You could also look at how you can transition IP, or they can transition IP to you, and also allow you to start manufacturing on their behalf. So there's a lot of companies that we're currently speaking to in Europe that are part of the supply chain of the LST100, which will become our LCH, and we're saying to them that our expectation and Australia's expectation is that you will work with a local business in Australia, and that you will pass over your kind of product to allow them. You'll hold the IP, you'll still own the IP, but you'll give them a license to allow them to manufacture that. So we can't just jump straight in and do everything on day one, but we've got a good strategy in place that allows us to look at what's the key components that we need to transition over to make sure that through life that we don't create future risk in the long term, but at the same time, how do we make sure that we can achieve that speed to capability that's absolutely critical to the nation?
So I'll put a couple of questions on notice regarding, innovation and how defence industry is working towards that. Also about the joint supply chain accreditation register and if that's working. But if I can go finally to your submission, you identified that the current 3-year timeline to develop the precinct, the Henderson precinct, doesn't align with the shipbuilding needs, which you've discussed to some extent with Senator Whittaker. Can I ask you to talk to the timeline? What's critically failing in the timeline with regard to the Henderson precinct?
Decision making, absolutely decision making. So we, as we said, we are building land and craft heavy next year. We currently do not know what the defence precinct is going to look like, and I don't think anybody in the industry knows what the defence precinct is going to look like. The Commonwealth is working very hard to make sure that we get this right, and we're trying to support them to do that. But at the same time, we have programmes that we need to build. Hence the reason that we're having to look at a temporary facility first, which isn't ideal. But I don't want to move. This is my point. My preference is, even if it's a temporary facility, I prefer to stay on that for one contract before I then can start another contract somewhere else.
Okay.
We're hoping over the next, I'm going to say, couple of weeks, and it needs to be the next couple of weeks at the very, very most. I would like to say days, but I'll be realistic that we need to understand where we can build LCH for definite, and then where the long-term defence precinct is going to be, because we need all the SMEs to work together to make sure we get the precinct right. The Commonwealth can't do this on their own, the state government can't do it on its own. We need industry to drive the solution, because we know we've been here before, we've done it before, so we need to be at the table to make sure that we get the right result for the nation.
So the Australian Government's investment in the Henderson Defence Precinct is critical to enable this. But if I can summarise this, there's a sort of collision of cultural practice often in private investment. There's an incentive in terms of profit that makes things move quite quickly. It can be high risk, it can turn out very well or poorly, but that incentivising tends to create the pressure to make decisions in a more contracted period of time. Is it fair to say that the culture of governments at all levels, local, state and federal, particularly the Defence Department, is they're a bit of a behemoth, aren't they? They move a little slowly, which is a strength, but also potentially a liability. Is it the decision-making chain inside the provision of that advice that is problematic? Is that where the brakes are on these projects?
I can't answer for, obviously, what.
No, I'm not asking you to, be them, but like, what are the barriers that you're hitting? Where are the barriers?
I think the complexity of Henderson's maybe not fully understood of everyone. So as we said earlier, there's a number of businesses there.
Yep.
That makes a living there and creates a huge economic advantage to or
the whole of Western Australia and
Western
the nation.
Australia. Yes. And defence is probably a small part of that when you look at what the resource sector brings in. So that's where probably the Commonwealth or defence and state need to better align and make decisions quicker to help industry to allow us to build that defence precinct. And I think that's the problem. I think currently there's still discussions going between state and defence. They need to work through that. They need to work through it very, very quickly to allow defence to understand where we're going to build, and at the same time make sure resources can still do what they're doing as well.
So you've been feeding into this pipeline information for some period of time. So if you on notice could give an indication of like the time sequence of like the conversations that have been happening, critical junctures at which you would have hoped things might have progressed, just so the community can understand.
But I think that's half the problem, though. I think the problem is that industry hasn't been engaged up to this point as much as they should have been. So now we are, to be fair. Now there's certainly people in position now that has been very kind of open and transparent and bringing industry in, which is a great change, and that's been well received by industry. But that's just been recent.
So the breakthrough moment.
Yes, and you're talking about a few months. You're not talking about a few years. You're talking about a few months.
Yep.
Since we've finally been engaged.
Okay, all right, that's great. And finally, you suggest that the Advanced Strategic Capabilities Accelerator model should be reviewed to ensure it doesn't exclude novel and early stage innovations. What are the problems you're seeing there, and why do you make that recommendation?
I think that so defence as an defence in general, we like to do things how we've always done things, and Navy does not have the capacity to to make sure that we have a full fleet at sea at all times. And then when you look at Army, they're going to have exactly the same problems from a landing craft heavy, landing craft medium perspective. There is a lot of autonomous programmes out there in different industries. We believe from an Austal perspective that we are front leading in this area. And we've done a number of programmes that we believe that we should be having better conversations with Defence to say that we could solve some of your problems by bringing innovation and technologies to the forefront to help actually with some of your future resourcing issues that you're going to have, as well as when you look at how we build platforms and how we do shipbuilding in the future as well.
Does that put you head to head as a prime with innovative SMEs? Because they're trying to claim some of that space.
So if I look at a Green Room as an example, which I think is a fantastic business, and so we partner with Green Room, we've supported and continue to support Green Room. We're in a partnership with them to look at the autonomous opportunities there. So we're actually providing them the platform and working with us to bring their business into defence. So definitely not trying to stifle SMEs. We're working with SMEs to make sure that they can grow and actually be part of the solution.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for the clarification there, Mr. Stewart. If you have some questions on notice, and in fact you actually will have some questions on notice, could you please provide them to the Secretariat by Friday the 28th of November? They'll be in contact with you and talk to you about that and your capacity to do so. You will also be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence, and you'll have an opportunity to request corrections to any transcription errors.
Okay,
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now welcome to the witness table representatives of the Department of Defence and the Australian Submarine Agency to give evidence today. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. And at the outset, can I thank you, Rear Admiral David Mann, for you and your team in welcoming us yesterday to the HMAS Sterling. But also we want to thank you, Mr. Chandler, and your team for the welcome to the Henderson precinct, which we've been discussing with one of the key industry players in advancing Australia's national interests through shipbuilding capability. I'm very pleased to say that we have in the room with us Mr. Cone Harvey, who is going to give us some evidence on guided weapon explosive ordnance. Joining us are a number of people from defence, but around the country. So just for those listening, we're going to have a little confusion sometimes in who's going to answer questions because not everybody who's giving evidence is actually in the room. So I want to ask each of you for the Hansard record to state your names and the capacity in which you appear before this Defence Committee. We'll start with those here. Mr Chandler, do you want to kick us off?
John Chandler, First Assistant Secretary, Submarines within Department of Defence's Naval Shipbuilding and Sustainment Group.
Thank you.
Rear Admiral David Mann, I'm the head of Virginia Workforce in Commercial in the Australian Submarine Agency.
Cohen Harvey, I'm the Assistant Secretary for Strategy and Plans Branch within the Guided Weapons Explosive Ordnance Group in Department of Defence.
Thank you. Could we go to you now, Mr Sowry?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Patrick Sowry, First Assistant Secretary, Infrastructure.
Brigadier Baldock?
Thank you, Chair. Brigadier Mark Baldock, Director General Fuel Capability Joint Logistics Command.
We might just try and get the volume a little higher on that. Could you restate your name, Brigadier Baldock?
Yes, Chair. Brigadier Mark Baldock, Director General Fuel Capability Joint Logistics Command.
Thank you very much. And Mr Hodgkinson?
Thanks, Chair. Andrew Hodgkinson, Assistant Secretary, Policy and Development within National Defence Strategy Division.
Okay, and Dr Cameron?
Hello, Chair. Dr Kate Cameron, First Assistant Secretary, AUKUS Advanced Capabilities in an acting capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The hearing today is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. Under resolutions of the Senate, an officer of a department, of the Commonwealth or of a state shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to the Minister. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. I now invite you to make an opening statement before we proceed to discussion. Mr Chandler, do you want to give
No opening statement from me, Chair.
Nothing from me, Chair.
Mr Harvey?
No opening statement from me.
Are there any people online? Mr Sowry, opening statement?
No, thank you, Chair.
Brigadier Baldock?
No opening statement from me, Chair.
Mr Hodgkinson's?
Not from me either, Chair. Thanks.
And Dr Cameron?
Nor me, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go straight to questions. I would like to go straight to you, if I could, Mr Harvey. Could you explain how the Guided Weapons and Explosive Ordnance program will progress and how it's going to deliver with increasing levels of sovereignty and resilience for the nation?
Yes, Chair. So under the Guided Weapons Explosive, the Australian Guided Weapons Explosive Ordnance Plan, we outline a crawl, walk, run approach.
Sorry, could you restate that?
A crawl, walk, run approach.
Walk, run. Okay, yes.
Essentially identifying that it will take some time to build an industrial base for domestic and sovereign manufacturing of guided weapons. The crawl stage we're in right now, we're estimating under the plan that it would take about 2 years. And then as we progress over time, so in that crawl stage, it is setting factories up, starting to assemble kits, getting industry on board through investment, and then over time start to expand the amount of Australian industry capability and components that are manufactured as part of that. For example, there are items that, due to information technology exclusions, are difficult for us to manufacture here, such as seekers, or items that are just difficult to transport or bulky, such as rocket motors and other explosive material. So over time, we will be building our capability in that walk and run approach. And then within the decade, we estimate we'll be in that running side where we're having a lot more Australian industry components involved in advanced manufacturing. So you'll see that through a number of the milestones that we have anticipated. So later this year, we're on track for assembly of guided multiple launch rocket system rockets. and you may be aware that we have a factory facility being opened in 2027 for NSM and JSM, so Naval Strike Missile and Joint Strike Missile, to begin production.
And that's with Consberg Defence
That's with
in
Consberg
Newcastle.
Defence Australia in Newcastle, correct, yeah.
Okay. So, can I just go back to a couple of things to clarify?
Yes.
Because we are not experts in defence and haven't spent our careers in that. So we are here as representatives of the Australian people who are looking at the geopolitical realities, endorsing the action of a government to advance a new strategy, a new defence strategy that is creating a real uplift in investment in people and capacity in the defence of our nation. So capabilities is a term we hear a lot in this committee, and it kind of covers so many different things. Today, the questions I'm asking you are about weapons, which is something that people understand. Obviously we don't ever want to have to use them, but there is a deterrence capacity for our country if we create deterrence through creation of weaponry as our sovereign right and within our own borders as much as possible. So with that kind of as the overarching arc, your description of us being in the crawl phase for 2 years, how far are we into that 2-year period?
So from the release of the plan, we're approaching the end. Under the plan, we said 0 to 2 years.
Yep.
And then that the walk phase was sort of 0 to 6, and then the run was between 0 to 10. Obviously, the 0 range to years is due to the complexity and difficulty in estimating precisely when capacity and capability industry will be there.
Okay.
But I would say that, yes, we are approaching the end of the...
Just about at the end of the crawl?
Yes.
We're about to start walking. Okay. So factories, assembly kits, what's that?
So effectively for the GMLRS, as they're called, the Guided Multiple Launch Rocket System rockets, kits, we would be procuring a number of those from the US and then assembling them onshore. The reason we picked GMLRS is it's a known quantity. It's been around for some time. And by being able to assemble the kits, we familiarise industry and ourselves with things such as the technology control, missile technology control regime and things like this, which are quite complicated and involve a number of nations and particularly the US. So getting across their systems of how they govern things and licenses and the like. So the kits are very much just, here we go, and then assembling them.
So one of the things that the committee's been looking at is the integration of our forces and international integration. Obviously, the US is a very trusted partner from whom we already purchase a lot of prepared kit. This is furthering the technical sharing of knowledge by creating the opportunity for us to assemble on land here in Australia.
Yes, absolutely, Chair. So we've signed a number of memorandums of understanding with the US, including recently one on the sustainment and development of PRISM, the Precision Strike Missile. That is a slightly more advanced capability of the GMLRS than we would like to be able to assemble here in Australia. So that involves getting American, US know-how of how these things are assembled and manufactured and being able to do it onshore here. And the memorandums of understanding are sort of a public statement that they exist because we've signed them that will enable us to have that know-how.
Which brings us to the next thing that you mentioned is investment. So these MOUs being signed and clarity of purpose and investment by the federal government, I'm sure, is creating a climate in which there may be considerable interest in investment. How's the investment pipeline going?
So as the committee members may be aware, Chair, that we have up to $21 billion announced by the government that is to go towards the GWIO capability program. To date, we've spent, I believe, in the realm of $500 million, but I can confirm that later in this meeting. And the investment pipeline is on a steady drumbeat, so we're not anticipating currently delays to major milestones. We're on track. And obviously we are considering what next beyond those 4 lines of effort, being large calibre manufacturing, naval strike missile, joint strike missile, the GMLRS and the rocket motors.
So I might get you to take on notice an indication of how the investment is coming in, so we understand what that rhythm is that you just described. And of course, you mentioned Australian industrial capacity building and capability. That's obviously embedded in all of those things you've been mentioning. You also talked about a seeker, difficult to transfer. So we're going to. What are we going to do about them?
So in terms of, that was an example of the type of component that due to technology restrictions may be difficult for us to take from another country and to get the technical know-how and knowledge. In that case, were we unable to access that IP, we would look to develop our own capability in that side of things. That's not to say that we wouldn't get material for assembly and components in kits and stockpiling that material and those components, but to manufacture them from scratch, that could be quite difficult, and so we might develop that IP ourselves in country over time. I wouldn't be able to comment on how long that would take. I'd leave that to our scientists.
Yep. Things are underway. Okay, so in addition to the 4 initial manufacturing projects that you've been talking about, which is the naval strike missile and the joint strike missile, the guided weapons production, that's the GMLR thing that you've been talking about, then large caliber 155mm munitions manufacturing. Yes. Can you speak to where that is? This is one of the three of the 4 initial manufacturing priorities for the government.
So, of course, Chair, so you may be aware that Defence had a tender process underway for large calibre manufacturing. We advised the preferred tenderer, Thales, earlier this year, that due to changes in the strategic circumstances involving the fact that a number of countries were starting to ramp up capacity to manufacture 155 large calibre munitions, and the ramp up in demand for 5-inch ammunition, which we do have the capability to manufacture here in country, we advised that we would need to change what we intended for, so we've cancelled that tender and have called for and are currently engaging and assessing new tenders. I can't comment about the progress on that right now because it is an open process. But
what's
we
the
are
timeline on it? Maybe you
so
can
the
tell us
timeline. So I can say that we are still on track to have a 155 forging capability on time for 2028, which was our original time frame. So we're still not anticipating an issue of being able to produce 15,000 rounds a year, and ultimately hitting full rate 155 production in 2030. So our original announced timeframes are still achievable. Okay,
so that's good in terms of the timeline for delivery. In terms of the reallocated tender opportunity, what was the commencement date and when does that close?
So it has. Here we go. So we released the new tender on the 28th of August, and it closed on the 21st of October, Chair.
Okay, and consideration currently?
Yep, we're currently evaluating the responses. We're expecting to sign a contract in Q1 next calendar year 2026.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And the 4th of the 4 initial manufacturing projects the government's asked the plan to deliver is solid rocket motor manufacturing.
Yes.
How's that going?
So the government's committed to invest $22 million over 24 to 2026 to develop options. The committee members may be aware that we had a request for information out, of which we had a number of proponents provide us information in September 24. We're currently in the process of assessing those and looking at where to next and what investment we need to make to lead us to manufacturing solid rocket motors.
So what's the timeline on that?
Timeframe is it's under active government consideration, so I would expect that there may be announcements in next year about in 2026.
Okay, thank you very much. The partner with the Commonwealth for the GMLRS, the Guided Multiple Launch Rocket Systems, is Lockheed Martin, is that correct?
Correct.
How many will they be producing by, let's start in 2029, is that correct?
So we'll have high rate production, yes, in 2029. It is the plan for the Australian Weapons Manufacturing Complex, which would be GMLRS.
So for people who only know defence through media, like movies, like me,
yep.
Right? I've got nobody in the Defence Force. I'm just interested in it as an Australian who loves my country. What does a GMLR look like? How many of them do we need? And what does full production mean to you?
So, description would be, think of a traditional, what you might see in movies about a rocket with canards, which are the fins at the end. It's, I wouldn't be able to give the specifics in terms of length myself because I have not seen one in person. But in terms of full rate production, the Australian Weapons Manufacturing Complex will be capable of producing up to 4,000 of them per year. And in terms of our demand for them, I wouldn't be able to comment on that. Obviously, it depends on the circumstances, but we'll have the capability to produce up to 4,000 a year.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Harvey. There may be a few questions on notice, but that is important evidence for us to get on the record. It's something that we just really haven't been able to get until today, so I appreciate you making yourself available and letting us put that out in public. I'll go now to Mr. Ribello for some questions, and then I'll come to my colleagues for a 15-minute block each. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps a question to Mr. Chandler, just in relation to this concept of continuous shipbuilding. So I'm just wanting to get an understanding on the record of what that means and how that is distinct or different from what the previous approach was.
Sure. So, and the way we would characterise it these days is continuous naval shipbuilding and sustainment. The idea came to Australian, public policy consciousness through some work done by the RAND Corporation in 2015 that informed the 2016 white paper. Back then it was continuous naval shipbuilding and the sustainment bit was omitted. But essentially the contention in that RAND work was that Australia, not unusually, was in the habit of recapitalising its fleet on a project-by-project basis. And essentially that meant that when you were recapitalising the fleet, the industry base focused on the construction, and the sustainment part of the industry base got a bit lean. And then once the fleet was recapitalised, the industry base would basically swing back to sustainment. And that industry-based movement between acquisition and sustainment of vessels was inefficient. And their contention was that if you could move away from a boom and bust project-centric way of recapitalising your fleet, then you would sort of maximise efficiency across both the construction and the sustainment of vessels. So that's the basic idea.
So there'd be some considerable shifts in terms of the workforce and how you're managing the workforce then, as opposed to having two different separate groups that would be on-off, and now having, I guess, more specialised teams operating all the time. Would that be a fair characterisation?
Okay, so the skills involved in vessel construction or sustainment are similar.
Yeah.
Both will have engineers, both will have tradespeople, both will have supply chains. The work will involve planners and schedulers. You will need inventory managed and so on. So those, those basic skills are common, but the more you get used to working on construction or sustainment, it is the detail of the work is different. When you're constructing vessels, for example, you tend to work at whole assemblies. You are constructing the hull, whereas in sustainment you will be surveying and repairing the hull. You will tend to install whole major equipment in construction, whereas in sustainment you tend to open up pumps and motors and replace bearings or things like that. So the basic skills are the same, but the nature of the work is different between construction and sustainment, and there is a translation that is required. Because the basic skills are the same, people in the workforce can move between, and some individuals will be able to move very flexibly because of the way that they are. Other people will take longer, and some people will just like one type of work and not another type of work. If I was to use an example of a company, and one that I, just through my career, happen to be reasonably familiar with, ASC. So they were initially conceived as a submarine construction company, but at the end of the Collins program, they moved into ship construction with the Air Warfare Destroyer program. And in my view, it took them around 7 years to translate themselves from a credible submarine construction company to a credible ship construction company. And then having established themselves as a ship construction company, they then focused on submarine sustainment. And in my view, it took them about another 5 or 7 years to become very good at submarine sustainment. So I think the skills are similar. There's just a translation that'll give you a sense of, a large-scale reorientation of a workforce and so on.
And I'd just like to hone into that concept of translation, which appears to be key, based on what you've said, to continuous shipbuilding and sustainment. So, are there any issues involved in that translation that we're picking up at the moment? Are there any opportunities to make that translation smoother?
Essentially, that sort of sequence that I went through was a repurposing of a company through different roles in our sort of national shipbuilding and sustainment industrial ecosystem. The move that we're making at the moment, and Austal with their recent testimony is an example where we're moving to select key partners for strategic segments of our national industrial system. So Austal has been selected as our strategic shipbuilder here in Western Australia. The idea is basically to work to uplift them and essentially make them the experts at shipbuilding in Western Australia, subject, of course, to their performance. The earlier testimony mentioned the idea of I'd call it an umbrella deed, but the strategic shipbuilding agreement, and outlined essentially the maturation path that we're looking to work through with that company. Very credible sort of aluminium vessel builder and have done the replacement Pacific patrol boats, working through medium landing craft to heavy landing craft and then moving on to warships. So that's really, instead of having a company repurpose themselves from submarines to ships and then to sustainment, it's basically selecting a company and trying to mature them through increasingly complex shipbuilding, basically.
And something else I'm interested in, and I think the committee is interested in, is the lessons that were learnt from Osborne. And firstly, if you could describe what the lessons were, but also how that is going to be applied to this concept of continuous shipbuilding and sustainment here at Henderson.
Could I just get you to clarify lessons learnt from Osborne in regard to the establishment of the precinct?
In relation to, well, I mean, yes, in relation to the establishment of the precinct, but also more broadly shipbuilding.
Okay, so, all right, so shipbuilding started out in Osborne with the Air Warfare Destroyer program, which was a build of 3 destroyer vessels, and the early intent with that program, and it was part of a charter agreed between the Commonwealth and industry at a reasonably senior level, was yes, to build some very capable warships, to uplift and create a sovereign, a shipbuilding capability in that part of Australia, and then the third objective was to do that in a way that left the nation with an appetite to do more shipbuilding. Yep. So it was really an initial project, but with an intent to do more. That project was done successfully enough to give an appetite to do more, but in terms of timing, there was, and the colourful phrase that was used at the time was that there's the risk of a valley of death, where the capability had been built up. There was no follow-on work, so the primary targeted follow-on work for that workforce was the Hunter program, and that program, when it was conceived, the intention was to limit design changes, essentially to move into production as quickly as possible to minimise the valley of death. And then another program, the offshore patrol vessel program, the early vessels in that program were targeted to be constructed in Osborne to essentially create employment for that workforce. So what I would do is say that was, you sort of start from an individual project with an ambition of doing more. The ambition was realised, and then the way that we did more was, added a few more projects onto it in the way that I've just outlined. Essentially, the mode in both South Australia and Western Australia, and certainly in Western Australia with the Strategic Shipbuilder Agreement, is to really make the continuum of shipbuilding clear, and I'd point to the Naval Shipbuilding and Sustainment Plan as where that is outlined. 79 vessels, the majority of which will be constructed in Australia, either in Osborne or Henderson. Essentially that's us moving away from that sort of project-centric way of recapitalising the fleet towards the continuum, and that's a journey that we continue on in both South Australia and Western Australia. In terms of the infrastructure in South Australia, the infrastructure that was designed there was designed deliberately to cater for continuous shipbuilding. So it was not purpose-built for something like the Hunter program. It was intended to cater for the Hunter program and accommodate it, and it is, but it was not optimised for the Hunter program in its establishment. And the reason was because the Hunter program is only one of the vessels that will be constructed in South Australia over the journey. The idea was to create flexible facilities that could cater for the envisaged range of vessels that would be constructed there, over a continuum. And that sort of thinking, we need to apply that similarly to Henderson. At the moment, the facilities at Henderson for the defence activities are reasonably project specific or activity specific, and the challenge is how do we get to the sort of similar continuum type infrastructure in Western Australia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Ms.
Thank you.
Cladeham.
I've got a 15-minute block. Try my best. I've got 4 questions. My first 2 are to Rear Admiral Mann. The first one is about the new nuclear regulator. So we've shifted from Panzer as on the 1st of November 2025, and I do apologise, I can't remember the acronym for the new regulator at the moment. Could you talk to us about how that is going? Tell us a bit about the regulations that have already been issued, which I think primarily relate to infrastructure, and what the plan is for further regulations into the 2030s and 2040s, when we will be receiving or buying our own sovereign Virginia class and then building the SSN AUKUS.
Yeah, interestingly enough, under the new system of regulation, the regulator is completely separate from the ASA, and very similar to sort of how our Panzer was initially, so outside of defence. So I'm not in a position to comment on their specific regulations. What I can talk about, though, is how we have developed our understanding of the regulation system. So over the last couple of years, we have worked very closely with the naval reactors area in the United States that sort of works closely with the Department of Energy and does the regulation for nuclear-powered vessels in that country, and also with the similar regulator in the United Kingdom. And of course with our Panzer very closely as well. And so that's about developing our own set of regulations, and up until the 1st of November this year, we're obviously regulated under our Panzer. There are a range of licences, as you probably heard during our tour of Stirling yesterday, a progressive range of licences that are applied to, in particular, infrastructure in this case, that allowed us to prepare sites and clear and construct, and then obviously operate them in the longer term. And each of those steps goes through a range of public engagement as well, so that the public gets to understand what kind of activities will be taking place under those in an infrastructure sense specifically, how they relate to the public, and then how the kinds of oversight and regulations and structures and governance and assurance activities that will take place during its operation. We have established quite a strong capability inside the Australian Submarine Agency to directly engage with existing regulators, and as part of our development of areas such as the Osborne Submarine Construction Yard, Henderson, as it evolves, requires very close liaison, and a number of the constraints on the development of and timelines, etc., are directly related to the ability for us to develop the evidence required to support the application for, and then the consideration of the particular licences that are required as we step through those. And obviously there are a range of regulatory frameworks that we work in, environmental, that we just sort of discussed as we were driving around the island yesterday. But so it's not just particular for the construction of infrastructure to the new regulator, but also existing regulators across government as well.
Mm-hmm. So I think that a really important point from that is the independence of the ASA from the regulator. So will it be the regulator that sets out principles and regulations with respect to risk management once we get the reactors from Rolls-Royce in the UK, or will that be determined by ASA and government?
No, the regulator will regulate the use of the nuclear technology, and obviously, but we go through, and whilst they are certainly an independent authority, we have incredibly close relationships with them to allow them to understand, obviously, regulation of that capacity in a naval sense is very new to us, and so that's why I said before we take a lot of our learnings from the US and the UK as the first country without a civil nuclear capability before buying into naval nuclear technology. There's obviously a lot for us to learn and gather information from our UK and US partners. But each step of the way we work very closely with them, so they understand what we are trying to achieve in a capability sense, and then they regulate those activities for us and providing advice along the way.
Okay. That leads me nicely into my second question for you. You would obviously accept that across the country and the Australian public, there are differing views about AUKUS, different concerns. In my electorate as well, some people are 100% on board. I'm one of those, and some people are 100% staunchly opposed, primarily because of environmental considerations, safety considerations, cost always comes up, and then the other thing that comes up is this notion that we're ceding sovereignty to the US. What is the ASA's plan to bring the public along and get buy-in and investment from the Australian public, given those concerns? And I ask you specifically, as you've got the kind of the workforce, hat on, but how do we get the Australian public, those that have got those concerns, to join ASA and government and industry in this endeavour?
It's a great question because we characterise all those things that you discussed under the sort of broad term of social licence, and that covers a range of activities. Obviously, from providing information across defence and government, and of course to the Australian people and the taxpayers who fund all the activities that we undertake. So in broad terms, social licence, I guess, can be divided into a number of activities. There's direct community engagement and information sessions. Obviously, from an information perspective, we have public-facing websites where people can access information from a range of things. Sort of tying it back into your last question, obviously, as the regulations have firmed, they have gone through public consultation. As we propose to seek licences to build or construct infrastructure, they go through that same process. So once again, community engagement. From direct community engagement here in Western Australia, for example, we held a number of community sessions in September, one in Rockingham and one in Fremantle, which was supported by my good friend Mr Sowry online and a range of other defence officials. But the aim is to talk about the program itself. Community engagement is a wonderful thing because you can have a wide range of differing opinions. The joys of living in a democracy is they all get to voice our opinion and have an opinion. And I totally understand that there are wide-ranging approaches to the different levels of support to the development of a conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarine capability. So community engagement, direct face-to-face that we did here in Rockingham and Fremantle, obviously two very different components of society, which allowed us to understand, some of the greater opposition, particularly in Fremantle, to the development of the nuclear capability here. And then also the sort of follow-on into South Australia, key for us as well, obviously, for the development of the submarine construction yard over there. Slightly different approach because of the proximity of residential areas to both of those. We have some great feedback from Australia's other nuclear entity in Australia, the use of the facilities in New South Wales, and some greater understanding of the kinds of impacts and understanding that they have with their community and the engagement that they have. So some brilliant lessons for us to learn there.
You're referring to Lucas Heights? Lucas
Heights, yes, Chair. And then definitely from the US and the UK. So, areas such as Barrow, nuclear submarine construction yard in the midst of a large community there. And then, of course, across the United States, both those countries with 70 years of experience in understanding. I think one of the big things is that there is a lack of understanding, and we haven't probably got provided enough information on to the community on where we're exactly at. And some of the positive stories, I think, an opportunity for the Prime Minister and the press to sort of be on Garden Island on Wednesday, or at the arrival of the Vermont a couple of weeks ago, to see the progress of the infrastructure on the island and understand the sort of constraints that we work in and underneath in terms of the regulations, both through the naval regulator and also through the environmental protection and control and stuff. And so Mr Sowry might have some information on some of those particular restrictions, but the aim is for us to assure the public that we are taking appropriate steps using the experience of two other very experienced nuclear countries to step through those procedures, and then provide ways in which they can positively interact with us as well.
Not an easy undertaking, given most Australians are not going to go to a website and read pages of information. They want their news, they want their information quickly. So, I don't envy you in that task.
Yes, and I think it's about providing, you say older Australians are happy to read the newspaper or watch TV. Younger Australians will get their information from social media and different outlets, and so we have to cater for all of that learning. And so a lot of people aren't going to come to a community information centre and register to come along there either, but it's about approaching those people that want to access that information and then provide a range of opportunities for them to engage.
Yeah. So can I dig into a couple of bits there before I go to Senator Whittaker? Firstly, on our windscreen tour, just for translation for people who don't know, we got in a bus and drove around and had a look at these things. That's what that means. We heard quite a bit about Garden Island here in the west, not to be confused with the other Garden Island, but the Garden Island here in the west, which is actually on an island that you access over a causeway and then a bridge to get to it. What's the percentage of land on the island that is currently being used by Defence?
That's about 30%, Senator.
Okay. And the remainder of the island is put to what use?
It characterises as a green zone, so hasn't had any construction activities on it, fenced off from both the public and also from activities from the Navy, lodger units and so forth on HMAS Stirling.
So this is an important message for people who are concerned about the environmental impact for starters. You also indicated, so let's get on the public record, that if there was to be further development, that would be infill in the space that is currently occupied by changing the nature of building. Do you want to put a little bit of that on the record too?
Mr. Sari might be best to answer some of those specifics so that I wouldn't want to sort of stray into some of his territory where he has a much better understanding of the development of infrastructure.
Okay. Mr. Sari, do you want to give us a response to that challenge?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Admiral Mann is quite correct. We would ideally like to work on infill, but we work under the auspices of the EPBC Act. And what we've done so far for that, we had a referral and assessment process that occurred about 12 months ago, or commenced 12 months ago. We had an environmental assessment at the end of May this year. That put 62 controls and conditions that extend out to about 60 years in relation to monitoring, reporting, preparatory planning, and management measures and strategies to guide the way we undertake work going forward. Now that only applies to the Surf West priority works, some of which you would have seen being undertaken today. Any additional works going forward will be subject to EPBC Act consideration.
All right, so your answer is, with those figures, is dedicated to the Garden Island territory that we're discussing. That is not an overall set of figures, that is specific to that site.
Correct.
Thank you very much. One further question, if I could go to you, Rear Admiral Mann again. Because you're in charge of the Australian Submarine Agency and we're talking about nuclear-powered, traditionally, conventionally armed submarines for Australia, one of the things that interested me from our windscreen tour was a very short discussion about the level of irradiation that might be identified. What are the techniques of monitoring that for people on such a vessel, and what are the levels of exposure by comparison to what the community experiences generally?
Yes, certainly, Senator. I think there are a range of aspects in that. So the activities that will be undertaken at HMAS Stirling for the transfer of waste from submarines to ashore will move into a facility called a controlled industrial facility. And within that facility, it will be able to accept what we call low-level nuclear waste and very low-level nuclear waste. So if you are sort of trying to sort of imagine what that would be, obviously when maintenance is conducted on the submarine, there'll be areas that need to be cleaned or sort of accessed. And there's the potential for some of those products to be radiated and then at a very low level, and then they would be gathered together. So the kinds of things you might be thinking there of is wipes to clear areas down, rags, tape, garbage bags, those kinds of things. So a solid waste, and those solid waste things are then sort of packaged up in appropriate containers and moved into the controlled industrial facility. And as you saw on HMAS Stirling, it's a very short transit from where the submarines are at Diamantina Pier, or would be into the future, and to where the proposed controlled industrial facility will be constructed.
Before you go on,
Yes,
one of the things concerns me as a member of the Senate for New South Wales is where misinformation is able to get a foothold in the community. Concerns have been unjustly raised about what happens at Lucas Heights, and you've referred to that in your evidence. At Lucas Heights, as soon as people understand that it's like gloves and potential waste products that have been used in providing oncology radiation therapy to people of, members of our families, colleagues that we've worked with who need specialist nuclear medicine, once that's all contained and stored safely, this is sitting in the middle of Sydney, surrounded by housing. What we're talking about here is something very similar to that, but stored on a defence facility, very separate from the community. So this is, I think, an important practical consideration for us to get on the record straight away as we begin to commence our capacity to have these nuclear-powered, conventionally armed submarines. So that's what we're talking about in terms of nuclear waste. Now, the other thing is when people are on board, they wear a monitor of some sort. What is that?
Yeah, so they, the teams that you would have seen when you sort of toured the submarines yesterday are monitored for their exposure. Obviously not everyone who works in the submarine works on the reactor component of it. And those continue to be tracked of prior to their embarkation in the submarine and through their time in the submarine and after. And that is very similar to the environmental monitoring that takes place at Garden Island as well. So baselines are established, and then as a follow-on activity, the continuation of the monitoring that goes through that. So under a number of different regimes, from the regulator to the IEA, I always forget what the International Atomic Energy Association. So all those kinds of monitorings continue to take place, after setting that baseline, and then allowing us to understand, any differences, both on Garden Island and impacts to personnel, but also the environment as well, and obviously the waterways as well. So that's those samples and monitoring and so forth. Sort of going back to the waste, obviously it contained, think of it as sort of being placed into 44-gallon drums, appropriately sealed up, and then moving to the controlled industrial facility that is designed and licensed to hold that low-level nuclear waste and stored in that area. There's also a range of other activities that go on there in terms of equipment calibration and those kinds of things for activities associated with the reactor.
Exposure to radiation in the community is something that we all live with and move around with and are obviously very unaware of a lot of the time. Could you give a bit of a comparison between, what ordinary Australians would experience in a day by comparison to somebody that they might care about who's thinking about joining the Navy and might end up on one of these nuclear-powered vessels?
The example that the USN uses, which is quite appropriate, I guess, is that exposed to less radiation than you would from eating a banana or from sitting in front of a large screen TV, or in fact if you fly in a plane, you are exposed to more radiation in undertaking those activities than in a nuclear submarine.
Again, I think a pretty important piece of information for the public consumption. I'll go back to my colleague, Ms Clonahan, for some questions. She's got two more, and then I'll come to you, Senator Whittaker.
Thanks, Chair. I have a question for Dr Cameron. Hopefully you're still with us.
I am, if I can find the mute button.
Okay, terrific. Thanks, Dr Cameron. And you may need to take this on notice, but I was just interested in how you thought things were going with respect to our, beefed up Defence Trade Controls Act. So we had new legislation in September 2014, and then the penalty regime came into force this year in March. That was all designed, obviously, to promote the transfer of technology between us and our US and UK partners for the purposes of AUKUS Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. Is that working, that regime, in your view? And is it looking like it will promote, I guess, greater capacity for innovation, research and development?
Great question, thank you. Since the 1st of September 2024, industry, higher education and research sectors in Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States have been able to export and supply most military and dual-use goods, technologies and services among and between AUKUS partners without requiring an export licence. As of 1 November 2025, there's been a strong uptake of the licence-free environment from industry and research sectors. Over 500 Australian entities are enrolled in the AUKUS licence-free environment, and Defence has received more than 1,300 notifications of intent to export. That has facilitated over $230 million in licence-free exports from Australia to the US and UK. Feedback that we have received from industry has said that this has streamlined and cut red tape for their ability to be able to transfer technologies.
Sounds like it's working to me. Thank you for that information.
That is the feedback we're receiving. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And my final question might be to Mr. Chandler or maybe Mr. Hodgkinson. I'll ask it and then you guys can share. In the DSR of April 2023, there was a concept of minimum viable capability that was introduced. I think it would be great for the public record if it could be explained what that actually means, noting the word minimum sometimes has a different connotation to what the concept actually does mean. And if you could explain it and then just let us know, are you seeing quicker procurement times? Is this concept, has it been a success? Is the shift working? Is it achieving, or is it too early?
Andrew, I might see if you are willing to have a go at the minimum viable capability definition first, and then I can talk a bit about delivery speed.
Mr. Hodgkinson?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. So the idea behind minimum viable capability, it's about getting capabilities into service faster. So really delivering the minimum capability to achieve the required effect within the desired time, to enable the lowest acceptable mission performance, and in that way retaining a focus on value for money, but placing a greater emphasis on speed to acquisition. So part of the idea is to support innovation and developmental projects, allow Defence to take on risk effectively, support speed to capability, work with Australian industry to be able to undertake iterative upgrades rather than waiting for a perfect solution. So in a nutshell, it's about focusing on the minimum capability that we need to get into service to get an effective capability, and delivering that within the shortest possible time available. That's probably it in a nutshell. If you wanted to talk about some examples, John.
Before you go to Mr. Chandler, can I come back to you, Mr. Hodgkinson? Can I
Sure.
break the news to you not too gently? Most Australians do not understand at all what you mean when you say capability in those sentences that you've just used. It means so many different things. It's not accessible in terms of, ordinary Australian speak. So we need, normal, common use nouns to describe the things that you're talking about when you say capability. So can you fill it out with a fuller explanation that somebody who never will interact with the Defence Force can actually understand?
Sure. So when I say capability, it's about bringing into service a product or a system. So, for example, an aircraft, if you want to take a generic example, bringing into service an aircraft that's able to undertake key missions and undertake them in a way that enables it to achieve the key outcomes that Defence and the government needed to be able to achieve, accepting that in the process of, so by describing it as minimum viable capability, we might be accepting into service a platform, in this case an aircraft, that's that doesn't necessarily have the full suite of the latest software upgrades, that doesn't necessarily have the ability to undertake the full range of tasks that the ADF might like it to be able to undertake over time, but it's able to perform that core mission. And so focusing on getting it into service with the ADF as quickly as possible so that it can perform the core missions that it really needs to be able to undertake. And then once it's within service with the ADF, looking at iterating that, incrementally improving that capability over time to build it out to the full capability.
Thank you. That's much.
Sorry, I know I used the term capability in my answer.
Yeah, but that's actually helpful. So, if we really break it down, it's get stuff that's at the right level for us to do the job, get the job going, keep assessing and improving it in the national interest. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, that's right. Getting the most critical, getting platforms and systems that are able to achieve the most critical outcomes into the hands of ADF warfighters as soon as we can.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah. So fit for mission.
Okay.
It's fit for mission. Mr. Taylor, are you able to give an example?
Sure. And there's a lot of examples. In the maritime space, the essential approach is either to look for off-the-shelf capabilities or minimum changes to capabilities. So the landing craft medium in service with the Nigerian Navy would be an example that's already been discussed to some. Rather than designing a new one, that's something that's already in service. Not that I would ever call nuclear-powered, conventionally armed submarines as a minimum viable, but the fact that the nuclear pathway includes Virginia-class submarines, existing capability, absolutely a key part of accelerating delivery. With if the alternative was to wait for the SSN AUKUS to be designed, that's almost a great contrast between you can get something very credible quickly by looking at what is, and then and I think a key thing is in picking what is having a path to turn it from good enough, and I think good enough is a phrase that Aussies understand, into something that is really good. So not everyone has a military capability, and it can be hard for us to talk in a public domain about exactly how good some things are, but most people have a car, all right? And if you want a family car, then sure, you could get a Rolls-Royce. That's reasonably exquisite, fantastic, no doubt, but might take a while and cost a bit. You might also be a bit more modest and want to import, a new car, but you might have to wait for it to be imported for a few months. Or you could get a new second-hand sort of family car, BMW, that would be very credible. And I picked BMW just because they're reasonably good. You could get that. It would get your family around the place as a good family car, and it's possible to turn that with aftermarket support into conceivably into a race car. So that's sort of an idea of getting something that's good enough to meet the mission of being a family car, but give you a path to something that would be, really useful.
And I think what's important in that is all three of those examples, Rolls-Royce, the imported car, and the BMW, there's no compromise to the safety of your family or the function, the function of the vehicle. So fit for mission, minimum viable capability is good enough. But
yeah, and that is really where a bit of judgment comes in. Like, you just do need to, and it's the same with your family. Like, what is the standard you won't go below for your family? It's a bit like that for our servicemen and women. There's just, we need it to be good enough.
Yeah, precious cargo on board.
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
That was Very helpful, thank you. I'll go now to Senator Whittaker.
Thank you very much. I'm sure it won't surprise you that I've got some questions about the Henderson precinct. So if we think about what we need to be able to deliver what we need to deliver at the Henderson Defence Precinct, in terms of our naval shipbuilding and sustainment, it's the build of the general purpose frigates and landing craft heavy, as well as depot level maintenance and contingency docking for our conventionally armed nuclear submarines. And whilst we are working to develop a precinct that can do those things, we still need to be able to continue the maintenance that's required on the Collins class subs and the build of the surface level and maintenance of the surface level vessels that happens there now. Can you talk us through how the $12 billion that the federal government has announced it will invest into that precinct will allow all of those things to happen inside the Henderson precinct?
Okay, Senator, I'll have a go and just so the Henderson precinct is very important for naval shipbuilding and sustainment in Australia. If I could characterise our ambition there slightly differently to the way that you did, so I would say that we're moving into continuous naval shipbuilding and sustainment in Henderson, and that is from patrol craft through medium and large landing craft towards warships and beyond. But yes, continuous shipbuilding, then alongside that, continuous sustainment, surface fleet assets, and then on the submarine side, currently Collins sustainment, but absolutely moving to nuclear-powered submarine sustainment. So there's a range of competing or concurrent defence interests there, and acknowledging the testimony of Austal industry colleagues earlier in the day, and in their part of that, as the selected shipbuilder, of course, a thing that they're focused on is the early schedule imperative for the landing craft. But another thing that we're interested in from them is the uplift of their company through the landing craft towards warship construction. So even within that company, there are two objectives that we're trying to balance, and then there's other defence interests with sustainment of surface and subsurface fleet that we're trying to balance concurrently. All of that's occurring within an industrial precinct that has very significant wider commercial interests, offshore oil and gas, heavy industry support, lots of small to medium enterprises in there. A lot of those small to medium enterprises contribute to existing defence capabilities and to those other industries. Very strong West Australian state government interest in the Henderson precinct with a state-owned common user infrastructure and so on at the moment. So, and from I'll say a Commonwealth perspective, yes, so Defence has defence interests in moving into continuous naval shipbuilding and sustainment there, but we need to do that in a way that maintains an effective and good Commonwealth-state relationship. We need to do it in a way that supports the wider economy, that doesn't act to the detriment of the wider economy. So there's a range of things that we're trying to balance there. In terms of how the $12 billion will contribute to that, and Defence is still developing its plans for that. We have been working through a range of studies. We continue to consult with West Australian state government colleagues, with industry partners, and so on. I think the Deputy Prime Minister characterised the $12 billion as a clear statement of intent, because what we intend in the precinct is a very substantial defence uplift. But we need to be thoughtful about how we do that, because of all of the very important equities that are in the space. And the Austal testimony earlier today talked about the schedule imperative that they have, and that is very important for them. It is certainly one of the very important things for us, but it's only one of the very important things for us. And what we're trying to do is balance interim arrangements and early movement to support speed to capability and minimum viable, while we also protect the sort of broader and longer term and strategic ambition. So exactly how the 12 billion plays into that, I think the basic answer is we're still working through the detail of.
Can I ask a clarifying question there and come back to you, Senator Whittaker? The document that outlines the whole process, the Naval Shipbuilding and Sustainment Plan Evolving the Enterprise, says that the development of the precinct will be a Commonwealth-owned defence precinct at Henderson to support multiple things: the docking, depot-level maintenance, nuclear-powered submarines, construction of Army landing craft, major surface competence, and all of the other things that you anticipate. What's the current status of Commonwealth ownership at Henderson?
I might see if Mr. Sowry wants to chime in here. There is a Naval Capability Centre and a Joint Logistics Unit warehouse in the Henderson precinct. My belief is that those parcels of land are Commonwealth owned, but perhaps Mr. Sowry can confirm. Beyond that, a lot of the real estate at Henderson is either owned by the West Australian State Government or their agencies, or it's privately owned by incumbent companies.
Mr. Sowry, can you assist?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mr. Chandler has answered that correctly. We have two sites along Quill Way which are occupied for logistics by Joint Logistics Unit West and the Naval Systems Capability Centre, as he indicated. And there's a couple of parcels of small leased elements of office space in some of those commercial businesses that provide services to naval shipbuilding.
And the building that you're referring to, is that the building where we had our roundtable meeting yesterday?
Yes, that's the Naval Capability Centre.
Correct. Okay, thank you. And is there an intent to increase the footprint?
Yes, there's an intent to increase the footprint.
Do we have a sense of scale?
The scale will be sufficient to accommodate facilities for continuous naval shipbuilding, naval sustainment, and in particular depot level sustainment of nuclear powered submarines.
Balanced off against the other objectives that you've made very clear in your first response to Senator Whittaker.
Yes, sizable scale in the context of what I'd call the area of Henderson, a substantial portion of that.
Thank you. Back to you, Senator Whittaker.
Thank you, Chair. Noting what you've just said about needing to balance the immediate priorities, some of which Austell spoke to in their earlier evidence, against the kind of long-term future of the precinct, Austell did say that they need to start building landing craft heavy at Henderson next year. Henderson can't currently, as it currently is, they can't build them there right now. And so I'm interested in what is going to happen between now, what is the plan between now and that build commencing to get it ready to start building those LCH vessels?
The schedule imperative is recognised. That new facilities will be needed to meet that schedule is recognised. The intent is to meet that schedule need through interim arrangements. The interim arrangements involve collaboration and agreement with key stakeholders in the precinct, in particular the West Australian State Government and Austell, and the Commonwealth is working hard to secure the necessary agreements to allow that early work to proceed.
Are you able to give us any indication of what that kind of actually looks like? What is required to get that work happening next year? Sheds, physical space?
Sure. So, and it's basically is that it's it's construction sheds and physical space for sized for medium landing craft. And I would say I would use the phrase interim arrangements. That my Austral colleagues use temporary arrangements. Bit of work to be done here, but certainly any interim arrangements we would be interested in a path where after initial use anything that we did could be repurposed for ongoing utility, basically. So, but there's work to be done there to figure out what's possible.
And presumably funding for those interim arrangements will come from the $12 billion investment that the federal government has announced.
That would be our funding source, Senator. Another reasonable funding source would be the landing craft medium project, and I would need to check with colleagues if on exactly how that went.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you could take that on notice, I would very much appreciate that.
Okay, I'll see what I can provide.
Thank you.
Senator.
You talked a little bit, someone talked a little bit, it might have been Rear Admiral Mann, talked about some of the consultation that's been going on in the community with regards to the work that's happening at Henderson. I'm interested in the consultation and engagement with other industries who use that Henderson precinct in oil and gas and other SMEs. And what work is being done with those other industries who are going to be impacted by this project.
Okay, so I mean the Commonwealth and Defence has sort of long-standing engagements with the Western Australian state government on our interests in relation to Henderson, and we just continue to collaborate with them closely as we can. In terms of the work on the defence side, I would characterise that has tended to seek input from the defence industry stakeholders,
right?
And I think we have tended to stay away from the other industry stakeholders, but I do have a sense, and Western Australian colleagues could perhaps confirm that they have been consulting with the wider industry base there.
So to clarify, you think your view is that the state government has largely been doing that engagement with the non-defence industries on the strip? Is that what you're?
Yeah, that is my sense.
Okay.
Yes.
Of course, one of the considerations to this is the workforce growth, and I assume therefore some kind of a population growth in Perth's southern suburbs surrounding the precinct. So I'm interested in the work that's being done with the state government and with other federal agencies into some of that broader infrastructure work. So transport and roads, schools, housing, community infrastructure, whether there has been any thought and planning. My understanding from some of the things we've heard over recent days is that we're talking about, well and truly into the thousands of workers that will be required, some Australian, and then of course we'll see some friends coming from our partners too. So what kind of thinking is going into what's needed beyond the actual precinct to support the work that will happen there?
Okay, and I would call it more thinking than planning at the moment. I mean, we're studying the area, we're recognising the complexity of the landscape, we're doing various bodies of work, and as we do that, we're absolutely sharing information with state colleagues. So from a workforce perspective, we have an overall sense of defence workforce growth in the Henderson precinct, and we think in the defence sector that demand will roughly double from 4 to 8,000.
Yeah.
In that sort of scale, in the coming decades. I think that might be by 2040, something like that. So that's a noticeable shift. And of course, as we do that shift, we're trying to not detract from the existing incumbent industries. So it's not like we're trying to make that population smaller in order to make the defence population bigger. So we do see it largely looking to add capacity into that region. Part of our intent in sort of sharing that forecast sort of employment growth from our defence sector with West Australian state colleagues is to talk about exactly how that's realised from from a societal perspective. So we can see that there'll be a demand for housing, schools, roads, and things like that. Exactly how that thinking translates into plans, I would say a lot of that is future work, but we're absolutely trying to share the demand so that together we can work through how we solve that.
Okay. Do I have time for another couple of questions?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So just following on from Ms. Clutterham's questions on the nuclear power safety regulator, I understand that some staff from other parts of the Department of Defence have now been moved into that regulator. Is that right?
That'd be a question for the regulator. Sorry, Senator.
Okay.
That's not something I'm familiar with.
Okay. And are you able to tell us anything about what kind of a presence they might have here in Western Australia, or is that also a question for them?
That's probably a question for them. I would expect they would have representatives here if they're taking a similar model to either the US or the UK, sort of like a field representative, but that's probably a question best for them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I'll go now to Mr. Rebello.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to change the topic to something we discussed briefly in Darwin, and that is fuel security, and in particular in relation to here in WA. So I think these are some questions for Brigadier Baldock, perhaps. The first question could you please provide us with a snapshot, high-level understanding of where we're at with fuel security here at Stirling/Henderson, and how does that compare to Darwin? Are there any infrastructure changes that are needed, and if so, why?
Brigadier Baldock.
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. Fuel security in WA, and you would appreciate that each region has its own unique characteristics. So up front, the fuel security in WA has the same issue as Australia, i.e. it's still reliant on the import of fuel from overseas. Fleet-based West is supported predominantly through the Perth region, but we also have in the past directly filled the fuel tanks from Ocean Tanker that we arranged through our partner of Viva Energy. So it's actually a little bit more secure than Darwin in the fact that it's got that direct ocean import, but certainly it's still reliant on the importation similar to the rest of the country.
Just before we go on, Brigadier Baldock, could I ask if you're speaking into the handset or if you have it on speaker?
I am speaking into the handset, but I work in a base that is in the shadow of a hill. I'll try and move around.
Okay, it's not that bad, but it's not perfect. It's okay. Let's continue. Thank you.
And
my apologies. So when comparing the fuel security of Darwin and Western Australia, it is something that we've identified as an area that does need reinforcing. The Defence has established the Defence Fuel Resilience Program, which is seeking to increase the amount of fuel that Defence holds in Australia. And we're looking at all regions, including WA, Northwest WA, Northern Territory, North Queensland, and so on. So A lot of the detail on that is protected for operational security reasons, but certainly we are looking at increasing fuel stocks all over the country.
Great, thank you. And just on that, so I understand that Defence has established the Capability Uplift Program, the Risk Reduction Program, and the Network Resilience Program. Could you provide the committee with a bit of an update on any of the activities that are actually occurring under those various programs and how that's progressing towards improved fuel security?
Yes, so those three programs are subordinate to what I mentioned before, the Defence Fuel Resilience Program. So the first one has been the Risk Reduction Program. That's treated, and it's almost finished. That's treated most of the large-scale or high risks associated in the fuel network. And these risks are things like fire systems, emergency management plans, the update of control systems, all those things associated with operating the fuel network. So it's not really large-scale building works. It's just fixing some of the things that we've identified over the years. And that's, as I said, that's nearly finished. There's only a couple more to clear to finalise with that. The Capability Uplift Program is building more facilities, and there are some projects that are underway to improve enhanced storage, to also improve the ability to berth. Now, berth is the fancy fuel industry term for refueling ships in harbours, and that's about to kick off that program with some projects starting early next year. The third one is network resilience, as you mentioned, and that's a much bigger program, and that's designed to not only improve the amount of fuel stocks in Australia, but also increase more storage again and introduce more distribution capabilities. So things like vehicles, the ability to convert commercial grade fuel to military grade aviation fuel. It's a different specification, and other things. And that's sort of, I mentioned, I think on Wednesday, our ability to minimise our impact on the national fuel infrastructure in times of conflict. So that's what that program is designed to do.
Thank you. And when we visited the fuel storage sort of facility area in Darwin, I think, personally I was quite impressed by firstly the technology that's involved, but also the ability to test the fuel there, and in the event that there were power outages and other things, that there was the manual operation possible, and even just the flow of fuel was still able to occur without, in the event of some sort of a disrupting event. I'm not familiar with the situation at Stirling or Fleet Base West, but are we up to scratch in terms of the technology there as we I guess witnessed in the Northern Territory?
Certainly, the Northern Territory facility that you would have seen is one of our newer ones. So that's using some of the newer technology. As you would appreciate, industry technology in the fuel world moves pretty quickly. The control systems up in Darwin are the newest, most latest available. We, as part of the Network Resilience Program that you mentioned before, are looking at upgrading control systems all over the country. So Perth is identified as a location for some upgrades. Some of the ones that we're going to do is upgrade fire systems and other things. You would appreciate that diesel fuel is considered combustible, whereas aviation fuel is considered flammable. And because they have those different classifications, they require different safety systems. So you'll see more safety systems on places like RAF-based Darwin than you would say on the marine diesel facility at Fleet-based West or East. But we do have projects earmarked to continue to increase safety, because that's our vision is safely fueling the force. So yes, there is plans to continue to upgrade And as part of that, that's the continue upgrade, because you could appreciate that software development and even things like cyber security moves at a speed that you have to be continually upgrading.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to go to Ms. Clutterham for
Thank
one
you.
question,
Thanks,
and then
Chair.
I'll take the call back myself.
Thank you. My question is to Mr. Hodgkinson. Mr. Hodgkinson, in the section of the supplementary submission, the progress to transformation to an integrated focused force, there's no mention of 2 of the 5 domains. So I don't see anything about cyber and I don't see anything about space. And in the initial submission, pardon me, there's just 2 bullet points that cover off on those 2 domains. Are you able to just share with the subcommittee what is happening in relation to those 2 domains?
Thank you. Cyber, I don't have a lot of information at hand, so I might need to take it on notice to get a bit more detail. But certainly, there's continual progress in improvements to our network capabilities, both defensive cyber capabilities, and defences and ASD's ability to undertake other types of cyber operations. Space, you might recall that one of the outcomes of the Defence Strategic Review was some organisational changes around the way we undertake space operations within defence, and there have been there have been a range of activities progress, I know, in the space domain, including with our US allies, including the deep space advanced radar capability that is progressing in WA. But I don't specifically have a lot of that detail in front of me. Happy to take that on notice and get some more specifics for you.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. And I guess the contrast I'd draw is in the original submission and the supplementary submission, there's a really excellent list of progress in relation to land, air and sea. And anything along those lines, and I accept it may not be as extensive, but that kind of information I think would be really helpful for the subcommittee in relation to cyber and space.
Yeah, happy to follow up on that.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. If I could go to just some general questions first. One is about the 11 Megami class general purpose frigates. Going back to the conversation, the evidence that you gave, Ms. Clutterham, around getting a quality product from another place and then building on our capacity. So my understanding is that Japan are going to construct the first 3 of those. Is that correct?
That's the intent, Senator. Negotiations ongoing to get us into that position, but yes.
Okay. And then the proposal is for Australia to construct the remaining 8.
I'd call that also, yes, a proposal and intent, Senator. There's one of the conditions is subject to a sort of a readiness assessment of being able to do the production in Australia, and we talked earlier about the journey that we're going to go on with Austal to mature their capabilities towards warship production. So, so we need to mature our selected shipbuilder. We need to establish some facilities for them to work in,
Okay, so are there any timelines around this at all, Mr. Chandler?
Yes, there are. I would need to check what's publicly available, but my belief is that the readiness to onshore production is definitely this decade. It's just later in this decade. I'm going to say maybe 2028 would be where we're looking at.
Okay. And I might just give you the chance to take that on notice if you want to add any further details.
Sure, help me if I could check with some colleagues.
Thanks very much. Could I go back to the evidence from Austell this morning with regard to training and industry partners? The workforce is ultimately the responsibility of the employer to be able to acquire it, but the need for us to generate this qualified workforce is a national imperative. So what we're seeing here is a partnership, a dedicated partnership over a long period of time with significant investment from the Commonwealth Government in our capacity to defend ourselves and build the workforce that's necessary. The last piece of evidence that Austell gave, without verballing them, was really a suggestion for a very particular kind of visa, which shorthand we're calling the AUKUS visa. What is the need, to the best of your understanding, in terms of getting the workforce in place in a time to deliver the programs on budget and on time?
We've got a lot of work to do, Senator. We need the workforce to do that. I might make some starting out general remarks, and I'll get more specific, and then I'll see if Admiral Mann wants to chime in on some aspects that'll be obvious when I get there. But yes, for industry partners like Austell, the onus on getting their workforce is on them. But we absolutely recognise that, firstly, as the Commonwealth customer, we need to set the work demand in order for them to know what work is to be done. And we're absolutely doing that, initially with things like the Naval Shipbuilding and Sustainment Plan. So we're really trying to declare that long-term demand, converting that demand into more practical implements with things like the Strategic Shipbuilder Agreement with Austell and initial sort of task statements or contracts under that umbrella deed. So absolutely recognise that we have a role to play in setting the demand and translating that into tangible, commercial arrangements. Then around that,
can I just clarify? Is it fair to say at this point of time, this is the first time over the course of the last 30 or 40 years that the shipbuilding sector can be confident that there is a continuous line of work? Is this the first time that this is really occurring?
I would say that is a transition that we have been on for, I'd say, a decade, Senator. But yeah, that's absolutely the transition that we're trying to make, is confidence in continuous naval shipbuilding. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Which changes the whole conception of investment by the sector itself in training alongside any public offers of training.
So that is absolutely part of the intended benefits of the continuous naval shipbuilding and sustainment approach, Senator, is to give that confidence to industry for them to be willing to invest and innovate and improve their business. And I did notice that Austell colleagues mentioned some ideas that they have. So it sounds to me like the environment that we're working to create with companies like them, it's coming together with good ideas for innovation and exactly what they are. I'm aware of some types of innovation that we're interested in, perhaps the use of artificial intelligence to improve maintenance planning, for example. I'm not sure exactly what their innovations are, but it's exactly, it's absolutely a part of the benefit that we're trying to create through this. So sort of setting the demand signal and translating that tangibly, particularly with key suppliers, we absolutely recognise that as a role, and we've given you the Austell example of that. Around that, we recognise that there is a government role in I say whether it's stimulating, facilitating, enabling, energising the entry-level educational environment, and a particular thing that Admiral Mann may comment on is the Skills and Training Academy, which is the implementation of that is being led through the Submarine Agency, but definitely supported and in partnership with Defence for mutual benefit. Another initiative that actually started here in Western Australia, but is moving at least to South Australia with prospect of going beyond, is the Defence Industry Pathways Program. Now that's a more modest initiative, but I would say it's really interesting for me personally because it's working through the TAFEs primarily, but it's really allowing us to access people and get them into the industry that would not otherwise have an opportunity to get into the industry. It's having good success with Indigenous. The sector tends to not have a high proportion of females, and having good success with females and so on. And it's just it's not on the same scale as the Skills and Training Academy, but it's a really good little side thing. So we have bigger and smaller ways of stimulating the various pipelines for entry-level skills. In terms of the particular AUKUS visa idea, and Admiral Mann may wish to comment here as well, but a genuine challenge with the nuclear pathway in particular is that Australia needs to establish a sovereign industrial base for the nuclear-powered conventionally armed submarines. But while we do that, both of our AUKUS partners are going through their own very serious industrial uplift. So it's not like the US and UK industry bases are right-sized and they can, they want more from their own industry bases. So I think we need to be careful about making it too easy for AUKUS partner industry specialists to come to Australia. That needs to be complemented in, and ASA will definitely have a view here, by appropriate government-to-government engagement, so that any collaboration we do between industry bases is genuinely for mutual benefit and not to the detriment of AUKUS partners. Basically.
So we're in quite a new environment here, with skills distributed perhaps more densely in our partners' jurisdictions of the US and the UK, and a clear articulation from the representatives of industry here today, at the very least, that there's a skills gap here. So it's not like we can grow our own from nothing. If you want to make, yogurt, you've got to have a starter culture. So if we start to think about this as a starter culture, they need to start a culture now. Often the pathway for a visa is a one-way consideration. And who wouldn't want to come and stay in Australia? Let's face it. That's, like national pride, all of that. It's a great country. The sun shines so much more. So we know all of that. But what you're talking about here is a respectful relationship with those two potential high volume, high likely participants, the US and UK, where we clearly articulate what our need is and fast track processes to get those critical people in to do what they need to do, with no promise for it to be a forever position. We might need to have a few of those as well, but there's some calibration of this, it seems to me, needs to occur, because if people are coming and they're going to be here forever, but it's taking them 3 or 4 years to get through their security clearances, that is not going to meet the need for us. So are you aware of any particular body of work being done about that particular part of the workforce challenge, the initial significant uplift by highly qualified people from either of our AUKUS partners?
Senator, thanks. I think if you look at the scale, and we think directly for the nuclear-powered submarine program in total, that we need 20,000 new workers directly. over 30 years from industry, the ADF and the public service. And so, as John said, there are a number of activities or initiatives that the governments of all levels have funded, and industry as well. So that have, with the Commonwealth, has worked very closely with the state governments, particularly in South Australia and Western Australia, to very good effect to deliver a number of those initiatives. The Defence Industries Pathways Program that John talked about, the Shipbuilding Employment Pathways Program, both of those are running concurrently at the moment in South Australia in a group training organisation called PEER, and providing the kinds of access into defence industry and shipbuilding in particular that John was talking about. So First Nations people, and increasing, in fact, one of the most recent intakes for the shipbuilding employment pathways had more than 50% women. So, and I had the great pleasure and honour to be at their first graduation first intake early this year. And to me, I imagined that a bunch of people students would just walk through the door and it would be like starting a school year. But to me, it was actually more like being at a graduation ceremony for an ADF parade. Families, beaming in the audience, sitting there watching because they knew that their son or daughter or partner was going into an organisation where they had a job for life and probably had jobs for their children as well. So. A range of investments. Initially, those investments were made on a sort of no regrets, best endeavours by understanding what we would need. Increasing in STEM, increasing general trade applications, and of course at the higher end in engineering, scheduling, and those kinds of roles as well. What we have seen so far has been an incredibly impressive response from industry, and so through John's organisation, and ASC, we have seen more than 200 people move into the United States, into Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, to undertake training across a range of trades and skills. And you saw some of those people sort of walking around Garden Island yesterday. So 20 of those ASC workers came back to Australia to participate in the USS Vermont submarine maintenance period. In terms of, from an ADF perspective, we have more than 170 officers and sailors in the US training program. You managed to see some of those people yesterday as well on the submarine. Once again, effectively training, doing very well in their training, and then integrating into the United States SSN fleet in the Pacific. In the UK, obviously we're doing very similar, but at a slower pace initially, because it's a little bit longer to build that up from a build perspective. So the first 5 tradespeople are sort of working into Barrow from earlier on this year, and a smaller number of officers and sailors, mainly officers, going into their training programs on the Astute class submarines. So what we've seen is an effective response from industry, an effective response from the ADF, and our capacity to bring people in through those initiatives are working quite well. There are some restrictions, as you've identified, though, in terms of bringing some skilled labour in based on country of origin, and therefore some of the visa requirements and the security requirements we have. The security requirements are understandable for some layers, for some types of work. Obviously, for someone who's going into infrastructure development in South Australia to build the construction yard, doesn't require to have the same kinds of security clearances and authorities and accesses that someone doing the combat system for the submarine has. So there's a wide variety, and so it's very hard to characterise it in a general term and say they're being withheld because of security visa requirements, because that is sort of simply not the case. And I think what we have seen so far, and the ASC workers in Hawaii have shown us this, is that Australian workers are highly skilled and impressive tradespeople especially. And so they have a mobility across this country due to the training and standards requirements set across Australia that allows them to move from place to place. And so if you would take an example of, say, someone coming from overseas has the capacity to sort of do a tradesperson job in oil and gas. Those oil and gas people might be the people that come into the submarine construction or the submarine sustainment environment as well. So that workforce mobility is truly something that we are working closely with not only the states but also the unions with as well, because they have a strong focus on that capacity to move people around the country. And obviously, an example for you, noting your state of origin, is the capacity for people to move in and out of defence industry, from across Australia, not just in South Australia and Western Australia, where the focus rightly is, I guess, in the first term. We are working with DFAT, however, in terms of visas and opportunities that might be available into the future. But at the moment, we are meeting our targets with the people we have and the access we have into those countries. And so it's not just a one-way flow at the moment. We obviously have a range of defence personnel and industry specialists that have come into Australia in a range of areas, from being embedded in defence. We have Royal Navy and US Navy people working in the agency and across defence already. And then we have some specialists coming in terms of from a contractual points of view as well, so bringing those nuclear skills in particular back into Australia. But you need to also remember that it's not every single job in the agency, or not every single job that works in a submarine, has a direct nuclear focus. It may be small for some large parts of the submarine, and then intimately involved for other trades and skill sets as well. So
I have to say I'm very heartened by your response there, but I'm hearing a very different story from you than we heard from the industry. So the question is, why is there concern, and I'm not just hearing it here, why is there concern still enlarged? There seems to be some communication gap about what their needs are, perhaps with what your needs and access to your skill set within the Defence Force is, that might need some further excavation to find out what the challenge is in particular. Saying that out loud makes me go back, though, to their sense of uncertainty about what it is that they need, and there's a heightened anxiety until they're very clear about the task and the timing on the task, and they'll get that shortly, Mr. Chandler, won't they?
Okay, so not exactly sure where you're getting your nervousness from industry, and certainly happy to understand that better, Senator. But just from the testimony today was from Austell, and a fair bit of Admiral Mann's response to that last bit was about ASC.
Yes.
And so Austell, strategic shipbuilder. Another thing we're trying to achieve is submarine sustainment, building to nuclear-powered submarine sustainment. There's just a perspective there where Austell is quite focused on their shipbuilding need, and ASC has a different focus on the submarine need.
Yep.
And part of my responsibility is continuous naval shipbuilding and sustainment, and that comes as basically we want it all to work together.
Correct.
And so early progress on workforce initiatives for nuclear-powered submarines going well, and absolutely work very closely there together. Hopefully you can hear we're joined at the hip. The strategic shipbuilder agreement with Austell is newer, and understand there is some decisions that need to be taken to get them moving on the Army, on the Army landing craft. We're working very closely and very hard to get those early decisions taken, just to get them moving, basically. Yep. So.
Thank you. I'd really like to have asked you some more questions, Dr. Cameron, particularly about AUKUS Pillar 2, the undersea strike reconnaissance, the artificial intelligence algorithms for deployment on the P8s, the quantum technology, there's so much going on there in terms of innovation. So really we've explored AUKUS 1, I think, to a reasonably useful extent in the course of this inquiry, but AUKUS 2, I think, stay tuned for the next session, is what I'd have to say. Final question: how important is AUKUS acquisition to the defence of the northern parts of Australia? Because that is critical to the entire nation, even though Darwin really is a critical focus. Can you just tie the whole thing together for me in a couple of sentences?
I think we might let Mr. Hodgkinson give a go from a national defence perspective. I think the answer will come out fairly naturally from him.
Thank you. Mr. Hodgkinson.
Yeah, thank you. So I think your question is about, just to confirm, your question is about the AUKUS Pillar 1 nuclear-powered submarines?
Well, it's about how the
In
whole
particular?
AUKUS project connects to a defence and a littoral capacity in the northern part of Australia.
Okay, so I might start with the nuclear-powered submarines. So, as you're well aware, the nuclear-powered submarines are an enormous capability boost for Australia, and that investment in that capability and the capabilities that they bring, including the ability to provide stealthy, survivable, lethal undersea system that can operate at longer ranges. That capability is absolutely fundamental to our ability to achieve what's described in the National Defence Strategy as the strategy of denial, which involves deterring military actions that threaten our interests and deterring any country within the region from considering projecting force against Australia or initiating a conflict within the region. It's a fundamental capability for us from a deterrence perspective. Knowing the National Defence Strategy said deterrence is our primary strategic defence objectives that we need to achieve. Those submarines, relative to the capability that we would otherwise have, are going to be harder to detect, have longer range and endurance, provide a more versatile platform for weapon systems and sensors that will enable us to hold any potential adversary's assets at the greatest possible distance from Australia's shores. So it's a fundamental capability to be able to hold hold an adversary's platforms, systems, capabilities at risk at longer distance from our shores and effectively deter conflict against Australia. The AUKUS Pillar 2, the AUKUS Pillar 2 investments and collaboration with our two partners there, that's really fundamental to ensuring that we have the right capabilities to be able to enable us to respond to changes in technology in a whole range of fields, which you've mentioned, and that we're able to bring the technological and industrial capabilities of our three countries together to focus on delivering capability that's advanced and that's going to enable us to provide a capability edge and an effective response in some of those emerging capability areas that are now so critical and that are going to enable us to operate, and that includes capabilities, undersea capabilities, for example, that are going to enable us to operate in those northern approaches and littoral regions to the north of Australia. I'd suggest on AUKUS Pillar 2, if you wanted to delve any deeper there, Dr. Cameron might be able to assist with that as well.
I'm sure she would, and I'm very sorry that we've run out of time to take any further evidence today. Thank you. So as we conclude our public hearing today in the Parliament of Western Australia, can I take the opportunity to thank all of our witnesses for coming this morning from industry and from the department and also the Australian Submarine Agency. I'd like to take the opportunity also to thank Commanding Officer Matt Lewis, who provided the US soundtrack to our experience of being over here in the West. We also heard Scottish and Scottish and English accents. We didn't get any Welsh ones, but I think we definitely had UK and US representation. And then, of course, proudly, so many Australians who are leading this initiative in a very, very challenging strategic time, which has seen the largest investment in defence in our living history. So I would like to ask if there are any further pieces of information that you would like to provide to us, if you could do that by November the 28th, if possible. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence. You'll have an opportunity to request corrections to any transcription errors. And as a resident of the Central Coast and a New South Wales Senator, can I acknowledge a former graduate of the Entrance High School, Rear Admiral David Mann, who has ascended to this incredible responsibility for our nation from a high school that didn't start out with a high level of success in the beginning, but is vital nonetheless to the growth of the next generation of leaders in the Central Coast region. You never know, there might be another Rear Admiral amongst the graduating class of 2025. Thank you very much for your leadership. Could I thank the committee members here, witnesses for their time today, my parliamentary colleagues for your outstanding contribution to our gathering of evidence, to broadcasting and to Hansard for their work as well, and I declare this public hearing closed. Thank you.